At the heart of this tragedy were three people whose lives had become deeply intertwined. Veronica Hartley, a lively and well-known real estate agent, seemed to have it all. Her husband, Damian Hartley, was a popular high school chemistry teacher in the town. And then there was Fiona Blackwood, Veronica's best friend and trusted confidante, a reserved librarian who had more to her than met the eye. To everyone in Centerville, these three were the embodiment of the town's finest, dedicated, approachable, and actively engaged in the community. Yet behind the facade of neighborhood gatherings and school events, a simmering tension was growing. What appeared to be harmless intentions, fueled by Veronica's quiet doubts, would unravel their idyllic lives, sparking a sequence of passion, deceit, and eventually tragedy. Veronica and Damian Hartley's relationship had always been admired in Centerville, their love story considered almost legendary. From the moment Damian laid eyes on Veronica, he was captivated by her charm and vibrant personality. She stood out, not just because of her striking looks, but because of the ease with which she made everyone around her feel welcome. Their connection was immediate, and by the end of the picnic, they were inseparable. Over the next few months, their whirlwind romance became the talk of the town. By the time fall rolled around, they were engaged, with a wedding set for the following spring. Centerville was abuzz with excitement over their fairy tale love story. The entire town turned out for their wedding, a celebration that felt more like a communal event than a private ceremony. Flowers lined the streets and the town square was adorned with twinkling lights. Veronica, in her flowing white gown, looked radiant as she walked down the aisle, while Damian beamed with pride. It seemed like the perfect start to a perfect life. For years, their marriage appeared as idyllic as their courtship. Damian continued to teach chemistry, inspiring students and earning respect throughout the community. Veronica's real estate career flourished, and together they were the golden couple of Centerville. But beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form, hidden from the prying eyes of their neighbors. On the surface, the Hartleys appeared to have the perfect life. Damian was a well-loved teacher, known for inspiring his students with a genuine enthusiasm for science and a calm approach that won over even the toughest kids. Meanwhile, Veronica thrived in her real estate career, where her warmth and savvy made her the top choice for Centerville residents looking to buy or sell their homes. They settled into a picturesque house on Maple Street, complete with a white picket fence and a spacious backyard, ideal for the family they dreamed of having. Their home became a gathering place for friends and neighbors, hosting everything from lively summer barbecues to festive holiday celebrations. To those around them, Veronica and Damian were the perfect couple, embodying the belief that love could truly overcome anything. As time went on, the illusion of their perfect life started to crumble. The children they longed for never arrived, despite countless efforts and medical treatments. The weight of infertility began to wear on them, creating tension that simmered beneath the surface. What were once joyful conversations turned into hushed disagreements, and an emotional distance began to grow between them. Veronica buried herself in her real estate career, often working late and accepting more clients than she could handle. Meanwhile, Damian sought comfort in his lab, staying after hours to focus on experiments and mentor students in need of extra help. Outwardly, they continued to maintain the image of a strong couple, but those who knew them well started to see the cracks in their relationship. As their 5th anniversary drew near, Veronica's insecurities started to take hold. She questioned whether Damian's late nights at school were truly for work, or if there was someone else in the picture. Once the seed of doubt took root, it quickly blossomed into full-blown suspicion, consuming her thoughts and clouding her judgment. Fiona Blackwood arrived in Centerville during the summer of 2015, stepping into the role of head librarian after the long-serving Mrs. Perkins retired. Her reserved nature made her an anomaly in a town known for its outgoing, friendly atmosphere. While most of Centerville's residents thrived at the constant social gatherings, Fiona preferred the quiet company of books, staying largely in the background and avoiding the spotlight. Veronica was the first to extend a hand of friendship to Fiona, stopping by the library one afternoon with a welcome basket of local goodies. There was something about Fiona's quiet smile and sharp sense of humor that drew Veronica in, and before long the two became inseparable. They bonded over their mutual love for mystery novels, venting about the frustrations of small-town life, and sharing secret dreams of escaping the confines of Centerville for a life filled with adventure. As the tension in Veronica's marriage to Damian worsened, she began leaning on Fiona more than ever. Fiona became the one person Veronica could trust, listening to her worries and offering solace whenever she needed it. For Fiona, who had never been particularly close with anyone in town, Veronica's friendship was a saving grace, helping her feel less like an outsider in Centerville. Having grown up in foster care, Fiona never experienced the stability of a loving family. Her past relationships were short-lived and often painful, leaving her hesitant to open her heart to anyone. She quietly envied the Hartleys' seemingly ideal marriage, even as she listened to Veronica express increasing doubts about her own happiness. In the stillness of her small apartment above the library, Fiona often found herself daydreaming about having a love like Veronica and Damian's. But these thoughts were fleeting, quickly followed by guilt. Veronica was her best friend, and Damien was untouchable. She knew better than to let her mind wander down that forbidden path. Veronica's suspicions consumed her, and she began keeping a closer watch on Damien. Every unexplained absence, every time he came home late, fueled her paranoia. The approaching anniversary, which should have been a celebration of their love, only intensified her anxiety. Fiona, meanwhile, continued to be Veronica's confidante, listening patiently as Veronica vented her growing fears about Damien's faithfulness. Unbeknownst to both women, the truth they were about to uncover would shatter their lives in ways they could never have imagined. One warm August evening, Veronica sat on her porch swing with a glass of wine in hand, casually scrolling through her phone. As she browsed, she stumbled across an article about loyalty tests where people hired others or used friends to flirt with their partners to see if they would stimulate. The idea lingered in her thoughts, slowly taking hold until it felt like the only way to ease her growing suspicions. The next day, Veronica asked Fiona to come over for coffee. Sitting in the kitchen with the scent of freshly baked muffins in the air, Veronica cautiously opened up about her worries. She shared her growing doubts about Damien's loyalty, revealing the fears that had been weighing on her. Fiona was stunned when Veronica made a surprising and unsettling request. She wanted Fiona to gauge Damien's loyalty by trying to seduce him. Fiona was so shocked she almost dropped her coffee. Fiona quickly expressed her objections, insisting that Damien was devoted to Veronica, but Veronica wouldn't let it go. She laid out a step-by-step plan for Fiona to flirt with Damien, possibly even kiss him. Veronica rationalized it as a harmless test of his loyalty, saying it would either solidify her trust in him or expose any infidelity. Fiona firmly opposed the idea, highlighting the moral issues and the potential fallout. She stressed how this scheme could shatter Damien's trust and strain their own friendship. Despite Fiona's concerns, Veronica begged her to reconsider, appealing to their close relationship and her overwhelming need for reassurance. After a moment of intense inner turmoil, Fiona reluctantly gave in to Veronica's request, though she firmly expressed her belief that it was a serious error in judgment. The once warm atmosphere in the kitchen turned tense and uneasy, as both women wrestled with the weight of the choice they had just made. As Fiona walked out of the Hartley house that day, an uneasy feeling washed over her. It felt as though she had just set something in motion that would alter all their lives in ways she couldn't yet imagine. She had no idea how true that sense of dread would turn out to be. The plan unfolded on a balmy September night during the annual Centerville Fall Festival. The town square buzzed with laughter and music, while the sweet scent of funnel cakes and barbecue filled the air. Overhead, strings of fairy lights sparkled, giving the event a dreamy, romantic ambience. Fiona showed up later than expected, her hair cascading in loose waves and her eyes enhanced by light makeup. She wore a flowy sundress, a noticeable shift from her typical conservative style. As she navigated through the crowd, she caught sight of Damien at the dunking booth, his t-shirt hugging his lean physique as he playfully teased the students aiming to dunk him. As the festival buzzed around them, Fiona took a deep breath and walked up to Damien's booth. She greeted him with an unexpectedly flirtatious tone, which caught him by surprise. While Damien replied courteously, he quickly asked about Veronica, leaving Fiona feeling a pang of disappointment. Undeterred, Fiona pressed on, subtly implying she was looking for some excitement that evening. Although Damien remained friendly, he seemed increasingly puzzled by her behavior. Over the next hour, Fiona kept up her act, using playful laughter and light touches to draw his attention, though his reaction stayed polite but distant. Despite Damien's polite responses, his discomfort became more apparent with each of Fiona's attempts. Yet, as the evening wore on, Fiona was surprised to find herself genuinely enjoying his company, noticing traits in him she hadn't appreciated before. This unexpected connection only deepened her guilt over the charade she was playing. In a final, daring attempt, Fiona suggested they grab coffee together, just the two of them. Damien's response was swift and clear. He kindly but firmly turned her down, reminding her of his commitment to Veronica, her best friend. Feeling confused and uneasy, Damien excused himself and walked away. Fiona stood alone, grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. While she felt relieved by Damien's loyalty, she couldn't shake the unexpected pang of disappointment that followed. As Fiona headed home, her mind kept drifting back to Damien. She realized this experience had changed how she saw him in ways she hadn't expected. In the days after the fall festival, both Damien and Fiona struggled with their feelings. Damien, unsettled and perplexed by Fiona's actions, began to view her differently, unable to ignore the shift in their dynamic. He started to notice qualities he had previously overlooked: the way her eyes sparkled when she laughed, the elegance in her movements, and the depth of knowledge she had on various topics. Meanwhile, Fiona was consumed by guilt over her deception, grappling with the impact it had on their friendship and her own feelings. Fiona knew she should tell Veronica about Damien's loyalty, but something kept her from doing it. Each time she reflected on that night, she recalled not only her awkward flirtation attempts but also the genuine connection she had felt with Damien. In their small town, they often crossed paths, and each encounter was now tinged with an undeniable tension. At the grocery store, their hands accidentally brushed as they reached for the same apple, an unexpected jolt passing between them. At a school board meeting, their eyes locked from across the room, lingering just a moment too long before they both looked away, unsettled. Trying to shake off the confusion, Damien buried himself in work, staying late at school more often, hoping distance would help clear his mind. Fiona threw herself into her work, spending hours reorganizing the entire fiction section of the library just to stay distracted. Yet the more they tried to keep their distance, the more their paths seemed to cross. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, fate intervened once again when they unexpectedly ran into each other at the library, an encounter that would change everything. As Fiona was preparing to close up, Damien showed up to return some overdue books. What should have been a simple exchange took an unexpected turn when their hands brushed again. The air between them thickened with tension, their unspoken emotions hanging in the silence, making the moment feel far more significant than either had anticipated. Damien confessed, his voice heavy with emotion, that he couldn't stop thinking about Fiona. Despite her attempts to protest verbally, Fiona felt an undeniable pull toward him. For a fleeting moment, they stood on the edge of a life-changing choice, caught between loyalty and desire. Then, as if drawn together by an unseen force, they gave in to their desires and shared a passionate kiss. The weight of their actions hit them instantly, causing them to break apart. Fiona's shock and dismay were palpable, while Damien, though torn, confessed that he wanted more. In the stillness of the library, Damien and Fiona had crossed a line that would forever change their lives and the relationships they held dear. The gravity of their actions and the consequences for their futures loomed over them, signaling the start of a complicated and potentially destructive journey. Over the following weeks, their affair grew in secret, hidden in the quiet corners of Centerville. As they navigated the dangerous path they had set in motion, they met in secret, seizing every opportunity to be together. The back room of the library transformed into their sanctuary, a hidden space where they could be themselves, free from the town's watchful gaze and the burden of their guilt. Their encounters blended passion with intellectual connection, each meeting deepening their bond and complicating their emotions even further. They spent hours immersed in discussions about books, debating philosophy, and sharing their hopes and dreams. Damien saw Fiona as a kindred spirit, someone who stimulated his mind and appreciated his thirst for knowledge. For her part, Fiona uncovered a new side of Damien that she hadn't expected, revealing a sensitivity and complexity that captivated her more with each passing day. Yet beneath their joy was the constant sting of betrayal. Every stolen kiss and every secret touch served as a painful reminder of the trust they were shattering. Veronica's face lingered in their thoughts, her unsuspecting smile a haunting presence, making their moments together bittersweet. As the seasons shifted, Fiona and Damien became more entangled in their deepening affair. Despite repeatedly telling themselves they needed to end it, their emotions only grew stronger, making the burden of their secret harder to carry. Their once tentative conversations about the future turned into more serious discussions, as they began imagining a life together, one filled with possibilities but shadowed by the consequences of their choices. One snowy evening, seeking warmth in each other's presence, Damien proposed that they leave town and start fresh somewhere away from their past. The idea excited Fiona, but she couldn't shake the thought of the hurt it would inflict on Veronica. Damien recognized the pain his actions would bring, but felt the need to be honest about his feelings for Fiona, believing that their connection deserved a chance to flourish without the weight of their current lives hanging over them. For the first time, they openly declared their love for each other, a pivotal moment that cemented their commitment to building the life together. With this newfound resolve, they began planning their escape from Centerville. They researched cities, job opportunities, and imagined a future where they could live openly as a couple, free from the shadows of secrecy and betrayal that had haunted them. Yet the weight of the hurt they would inflict, especially on Veronica, cast a shadow over their plans, infusing their anticipation of a new life with bittersweet undertones. Unbeknownst to them, their carefully laid plans were on the verge of collapsing as the web of lies and betrayal they had spun began to unravel. As Damien and Fiona's affair intensified, Veronica felt increasingly isolated, sensing something amiss but unable to pinpoint the source of her unease. The loyalty test Veronica had initiated had backfired in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. Though unaware of the full extent of the betrayal, she sensed that something was terribly wrong. Damien's behavior, while still outwardly caring, had shifted in subtle yet unmistakable ways. He was more distant, distracted, and there were moments when he seemed to avoid her gaze, leaving Veronica with a growing sense of dread. He was increasingly distant, often lost in thought, and his late nights at school had become more frequent. When he was at home, he seemed distracted, giving vague and non-committal responses to her questions. Fiona, too, had grown elusive, slipping away just when Veronica felt the need for connection the most. The shifts in their behaviors only deepened Veronica's concern, leaving her to wonder what was truly happening beneath the surface. Their weekly coffee dates were frequently canceled at the last minute, and when they did manage to meet, Fiona appeared nervous and distracted. She avoided eye contact, and whenever Veronica brought up Damien, Fiona quickly changed the subject. At first, Veronica tried to brush off her concerns, convincing herself that she was overthinking things. But as the odd behavior continued, her unease only grew stronger. Veronica repeatedly told herself that she was being paranoid, that her insecurities were distorting her perspective. However, as the weeks went by, the signs became increasingly difficult to dismiss. One evening, while sorting through the laundry, she discovered a long hair on Damien's shirt, one that didn't match her own. The discovery sent a chill down her spine, amplifying her worries and forcing her to confront the reality she had been trying to avoid. It was a hair that was undeniably not her own. Then, one day, she overheard him on the phone, speaking in hushed tones and abruptly hanging up as she entered the room. The final straw came when Veronica decided to stop by the school unexpectedly one afternoon, hoping to surprise Damien with lunch. Instead, she found him deep in conversation with Fiona, their laughter echoing in the hallway. The sight sent a wave of nausea through her, igniting her suspicions into full-blown dread. Damien wasn't in his classroom or the science lab. Puzzled, Veronica asked a passing student, who casually mentioned seeing Mr. Hartley heading toward the library. Her heart pounded as she made her way there, a mix of dread and curiosity swelling within her. With each step, the weight of her suspicions grew heavier, pushing her toward an encounter she instinctively knew would change everything. Through the window, Veronica's worst fears were confirmed. She saw Damien and Fiona standing close, their heads bowed in intimate conversation. Then, as if in slow motion, she watched Damien reach out and gently tuck a strand of hair behind Fiona's ear, his hand lingering on her cheek. In that crushing moment, Veronica's world shattered. Everything she had suspected but refused to believe came crashing down, leaving her standing frozen, overwhelmed by betrayal. The truth she had been avoiding hit her like a tidal wave. Her husband and her best friend were having an affair, and in a cruel twist of fate, she felt responsible. Choking back a sob, Veronica fled the school, her mind spinning with the devastating implications of what she had just witnessed. Every step away from the building felt heavier as the weight of betrayal and guilt pressed down on her. The tension reached its breaking point one evening as Veronica sat in silence, waiting for Damien to return home. The moment he walked through the door, she confronted him, her voice trembling as she revealed she had seen him and Fiona together at the library. Caught off guard, Damien stammered, trying to explain, but Veronica, overwhelmed with anger and hurt, cut him off. The betrayal was laid bare, and there was no escaping the truth. Their confrontation took an unexpected turn when Fiona arrived, intending to confess her involvement with Damien. She had no idea that Veronica was already aware of the affair. The atmosphere crackled with tension as Veronica, consumed by anger and betrayal, lunged at Fiona, demanding answers. The room erupted into chaos, emotions flaring as long-suppressed feelings spilled over in a tumultuous clash. Damien quickly intervened, trying to defuse the escalating situation. As tempers flared, Veronica, in her fury, blurted out her own deception, the loyalty test she had orchestrated using Fiona. Both Damien and Fiona froze, stunned by this revelation. What had begun as an affair was now entangled in layers of manipulation and mistrust. The betrayal was no longer one-sided. It ran deeper than any of them had realized, leaving them reeling from the complexity of their actions and the damage they had caused. As the full extent of their collective deception surfaced, the atmosphere thickened with anger, guilt, and heartbreak. Veronica, consumed by the realization that Damien and Fiona intended to leave together, reacted in anguish, violently throwing a vase against the wall. Shards of glass scattered across the floor, mirroring the shattered trust among them. The scene culminated with the three of them standing amidst the emotional and physical wreckage, each grappling with the consequences of their actions and the uncertain future that lay ahead, the weight of betrayal hanging heavily. The perfect lives they once believed in lay irreparably shattered, forcing them to confront the aftermath of their choices. The tension escalated as Veronica, now unnervingly calm, demanded to know the details of Damien and Fiona's plans to leave together. Damien struggled to explain, but his words only seemed to stoke Veronica's fury further. The room crackled with tension as old wounds were reopened, and each accusation intensified the rift among them. The weight of their betrayals hung heavy, with the unspoken reality that nothing would ever be the same. Fiona, overwhelmed with guilt, attempted to apologize, unintentionally shifting some of the blame back to Veronica's original plan. This only ignited Veronica's fury, prompting her to lunge at Fiona. In a desperate bid to protect them both, Damien stepped in, restraining Veronica, but in the chaotic struggle she managed to scratch his face, leaving a vivid mark of the turmoil unfolding before them. The air was thick with tension and pain, each moment underscoring the irrevocable damage their actions had wrought on their relationships. In the midst of the chaos, Veronica seized the moment of distraction to push past Damien, advancing toward Fiona. Startled, Fiona stumbled backward, her foot catching on the rug, sending her sprawling to the floor. In a desperate attempt to regain her balance, she instinctively reached out, grabbing onto Veronica's arm for support. The unexpected contact drew both women into a precarious dance of emotion, vulnerability mingling with their simmering anger as they teetered on the edge of confrontation. The combined force of Fiona's fall and Veronica's advance sent them both crashing into the heavy oak bookcase that loomed over the living room. Time seemed to freeze as they teetered against the shelves, the air thick with tension and disbelief. Then, with a sickening creak, the bookcase began to tilt dangerously, Books and trinkets teetered precariously, a cascade of chaos threatening to unfold. In that split second, all three of them realized the weight of their actions, both physical and emotional, as they stood on the brink of disaster. Damien's eyes widened in horror as he realized what was about to happen. He shouted out, rushing forward in a desperate attempt to stop it, but it was already too late. The heavy bookcase tilted, falling with a loud crash, pinning both women beneath its weight. The sharp crack of wood splintering and glass shattering filled the room, followed by an unbearable silence. Damien stood, paralyzed by shock, staring at the wreckage where Veronica and Fiona had been only moments earlier. Then, snapping into action, he began desperately clearing away the scattered books and broken shelves. While he worked, a strange warmth began to coat his hands. It took him a moment, squinting in the faint light, to recognize what it was: blood. There was so much blood. A faint moan rose from under the wreckage, pushing him to work faster. Someone was still alive. As Damien kept digging, a horrifying truth hit him: only one person had survived the fall. The hours after the tragic accident were a hazy blur for him. His mind, typically sharp and analytical, had shut down, leaving him running on pure instinct and adrenaline. When he finally uncovered the bodies, the sight before him was horrific, one that would stay with him forever. Veronica lay still, her eyes open but lifeless. A deep gash marred her forehead where she'd hit the edge of a shelf. Next to her, Fiona moved weakly, her hair matted with blood. Confronted with the terrible outcome of their choices, Damien made a decision in that moment, one that would change all their lives forever. He couldn't stand the thought of losing them both. His hands trembled as he searched for a pulse on Veronica, though deep down, he knew it was pointless. She was already gone. In the hours that followed, gripped by shock and panic, Damien set a plan in motion that defied everything he stood for. He hurriedly cleaned the scene, picking up broken pieces and shifting furniture to erase signs of the struggle. Then, under the veil of night, he carefully loaded Veronica's lifeless body into his car. The drive to Willow Creek felt like the longest of Damien's life. Every shadow looked like a hidden witness, every sound like the wail of sirens closing in. When he finally arrived at the old Mill Road Bridge, he paused briefly before letting his wife's body slip into the murky waters below. When he returned home, he found Fiona barely conscious on the couch where he had left her. Together, they pieced together a story. Veronica had stormed out after a heated argument, taking some clothes in her car with her. They figured she just needed some time to cool off and decided they would report her missing in the morning if she hadn't come back. As dawn illuminated Centerville, Detective Elias Reeves received the call about the missing person. Little did he know that this routine report would plunge him into one of the most complex and disturbing cases of his career. In the weeks that followed, as search parties scoured the area and posters of Veronica's smiling face popped up around town, Damien and Fiona clung tightly to their story and to each other. However, as the investigation heated up and inconsistencies in their account began to surface, they both realized that the truth they had worked so hard to conceal was beginning to emerge. Detective Elias Reeves was a man who took pride in his ability to read people. After 20 years on the force, he had developed an almost uncanny knack for detecting when someone was lying. From the moment he first interviewed Damien Hartley and Fiona Blackwood, his instinct screamed that something wasn't right. The investigation into Veronica Hartley's disappearance moved forward methodically. Reeves and his team meticulously sifted through cell phone records, interviewed friends and colleagues, and pieced together the events leading up to that fateful night. Initially, Damien and Fiona's story appeared solid. Multiple people confirmed they had seen Veronica looking upset in the days before she vanished. Her car was indeed missing from the Hartley driveway. However, as days turned into weeks, cracks started to emerge in their story. A breakthrough occurred when a teenager fishing off the Mill Road Bridge hooked something heavy. To his shock, he pulled up a waterlogged purse containing Veronica's driver's license. This discovery shifted the investigation's focus, prompting dive teams to search Willow Creek. As the pressure mounted around them, Damien and Fiona began to crack under the strain. Fiona, overwhelmed with guilt and plagued by insomnia, grew increasingly erratic. During her third interview with Detective Reeves, she broke down, admitting to the affair but claiming that Veronica's death was an accident. Faced with Fiona's partial confession, Damien finally shattered under the burden of his own lies. In a grueling 12-hour interrogation, he laid bare the entire sordid story, detailing Veronica's misguided loyalty test, the tragic accident, and his frantic decision to conceal it. The last piece of the puzzle emerged when Veronica's body was recovered from Willow Creek. The autopsy revealed that her death had indeed resulted from blunt force trauma, consistent with being struck by the falling bookcase. Ultimately, both Damien and Fiona were found guilty of involuntary manslaughter and conspiracy to conceal a death. The judge, recognizing the accidental nature of Veronica's death, while condemning their subsequent actions, sentenced them each to 15 years in prison. As the gavel struck, sealing their fates, a collective sigh seemed to sweep through Centerville. The tragedy had shaken the town to its foundations, breaking the illusion of small-town innocence and leaving behind a community forever altered.